Hi, I'm Yosefa Huber. I'm a US CPA specializing in taxation of Americans living abroad. And I want to tell you about the six most common ways that you can fix non-compliance or filing, incomplete filing, incorrect filing, or not filing at all for several years. So first of all, a few disclaimers. Um, I'm going to talk about the most common issues to fix the most common ways to fix these issues. I'm not necessarily going to get into every single very unique situation. I'm also going to be mentioning professional. When I say a professional, I mean a US licensed CPA or EA or a tax attorney, a US tax attorney specializing in international taxation. In most cases, the best person for your situation is going to be someone in your country of residence in most cases, because they're going to understand the tax treaties that apply to you, and they'll understand the different kinds of income that you might have that you might not think to tell an accountant. If you were dealing with an accountant in the US, you might not think about certain pension type accounts and certain types of income. So generally speaking, someone in your country of residence is going to be your best option. And if you haven't been filing before, speaking with a professional is usually your best stop. So I'm doing this, I'm explaining these things to give you a basis to have a more educated discussion with a professional. I want you to know the options before you start speaking with a professional so that you'll be more ready to hear what they say, you'll have better questions to ask, and you'll know what you're getting yourself into. A lot of people come to me after not filing, let's say 10 years, and they don't understand that however many tax returns they file, they usually are going to have to pay for all of those tax returns. If they're filing 3 tax returns, it's probably going to be about 3 times as much money as filing 1 tax return. So that surprises a lot of people. These are the kinds of things that I want to explain so that by the time you get to a professional, you're a little bit more educated about what you can expect. Uh, if you don't know what you need to file, you should listen to a couple of my past videos, which I can link to. One of them is about the basics of the types of reporting that you need to do when you live abroad. I won't be presenting every single detail, every single scenario and combination here. This is a general overview of the most common paths towards compliance. And a lot of determining which is the best situation for you is going to be more of an art than a science. It's not as black and white as you might think. And that really throws a lot of people off. When some people talk to me and they just say, well, tell me what I'm supposed to do. And that's really fine. And if you're current on your filing, it's very easy for you to call me and I can say, well, you made X amount of money. Yes, you do need to file, or no, you don't need to file. But when it comes to years of not filing or not filing correctly, then it's a little bit more of an art to determine what you should be doing, what has the least risk, the most reward. Okay, situation number one is that you filed all the reports you were supposed to. You reported all the income you were supposed to, but you made some sort of a mistake. What are examples of mistakes that a lot of expats make? Let's say you were eligible to get a refundable child tax credit and you didn't. If you want to know more about that, I have a video about refunds. Let's say you forgot to include some really minimal amounts of income from foreign accounts, or you just learned that your Social Security is exempt from taxation in the US by the US Israel tax treaty or another country's tax treaty. So those are all things that you can fix, either because legally you should or because you could get refunds by fixing them. So in most cases, you can fix going back 3 years. The statute of limitations on a tax return is 3 years from the date it was filed or from the due date, whichever is later. And you can request refunds up to 3 years from the due date, including extensions. Um, if you've made a really serious mistake, not including major amounts of foreign income or accounts, that completely wipes away the statute of limitations, and theoretically the IRS could look back more than that. But when you're talking about getting refunds, you have 3 years. So for those, you can just fix them. You go back 3 years, you don't need any big explanation. You put the explanation of why you're fixing each one on each tax return. Situation number two, you're totally up to date on your taxes and all the income from the foreign taxes from the foreign accounts was reported on each tax return, but you didn't file FBARs. So what do? If you're not under investigation, you haven't been contacted by the IRS or any other US authorities about your missing FBARs, and you have some sort of reasonable cause for not having filed, which in the specific case of FBARs, not most law, but specifically with certain foreign reporting, reasonable cause can be, I didn't know about the FBAR, I had never heard about it. In cases like that, you have a good excuse, you just file whichever ones you're missing. Usually you go back, you file 3 years that are, excuse me, 6 years that are late. The statute of limitations on for FBARs is 6 years. Even if you didn't file an FBAR, specifically for FBARs, the statute of limitations is 6 years. So you file 6 years that are late. If you're watching this today, I'm recording this April 2020, you would file back the beginning of April 2020, you would file back to 2013. 2013 through 2019. 2013 through 18 need your excuse letter. 2019 as of today is not yet late. Situation, let's say call it 2B. Same facts as before. You already filed tax returns, but you were missing some other informational report. Not an FBAR, but something that would normally go to the IRS. For example, you didn't file Form 5471 to report your foreign corporation. Foreign meaning outside the US. So let's say, for example, you're in Israel, you're a dentist, so you incorporated your dental practice and you didn't report that, that you should be filing a Form 5471, which is a pretty hefty form, not something you're going to be filing on consumer software. Or you didn't file Form 8938, which is a FATCA form. It's very similar to the FBAR, but it goes with the tax return. Both of those completely open up the statute of limitations on your tax return, and that really should be fixed. Or another form that you might have needed is Form 3520 that reports large gifts from a foreign person or foreign trusts, and among some other things. In these cases, speak with a professional, but you're probably eligible in both of these situations. For the FBARs, you file delinquent FBAR submission procedures, and in the second case, you file delinquent international information return submission procedures. What you're doing is you're filing, in the first case, you're filing just FBARs. In the second case, you're filing, usually for most of these, amended tax returns, where you include those forms and you include an explanation for why you didn't know that you needed to file them. In most of these cases that I've mentioned so far, you're not owing taxes, you're not paying any penalties. This gets you out of penalties. If the IRS catches you before you fix this, there can be very severe penalties, starting at $10,000. Situation 3. You've never filed, or you haven't filed in a really long time, but you have a good excuse. What are some good excuses? You didn't know, or you didn't understand that you needed to file, or you didn't understand the specific rules, you thought you were exempt. A professional told you you didn't need to file. Professional can be a wide range. So if your family accountant in the States told you you didn't need to file, it happens a lot. It's not true. A lot of accountants who are sitting in the US and only working with people in the US don't understand everything about international filing. So it's not terribly uncommon that they might say that you don't need to file. But your brother who is not an accountant telling you that you didn't need to file, not really a professional, still you have a good excuse. You misunderstood, usually. If you have a severe physical or mental health issues, like you were in a coma, that's a really good excuse why you couldn't have filed. Or you live, and with all of these things, you live outside the US. In these cases, you may be eligible, you're probably eligible for the streamlined foreign offshore procedures. In these cases, you must have been outside the US for 330 days in any of the past 3 years. So if you're visiting the US for at least a month in every year, you're going to have a problem with this one. You're not going to be eligible. You must demonstrate non-willfulness. So usually that's a nice statement explaining why you didn't know you need to file or whatever your excuses are, and not just that. Usually you have a nice background statement. I was born here, I lived here, I moved here, and these are all the family issues that I had and all the mental issues that I had and all our family troubles, and you really spill it all. You really explain to the IRS your family situation, whatever hardships you've had, and why you didn't file. To do this, you need a US Social Security number or an ITIN. In most cases, it's going to be a Social Security number. There is a specific process for people who don't have a Social Security number and want to give up citizenship. But in most cases, this is for people who don't want to give up citizenship. You must get a Social Security number in order to actually file the taxes. And you in a case where you actually do owe taxes, then you would have to pay taxes and interest. But this gets you out of penalties, which can be incredibly valuable if you actually owe taxes. Most people don't owe taxes, but if you are self-employed, or that's the main reason. Sometimes with rental properties, but usually if you're self-employed, that's the number one reason people owe taxes. And so this can be a really good process and a really great value for people who are self-employed to get out of those penalties for not having filed. Another good reason is if you've missed any of the informational reports that come with automatic penalties, like you had a foreign corporation like an Israeli Ba'am, and you didn't report that, that's going to be an automatic $10,000 penalty for past years. I believe it went up to $25,000 this year. So using the streamlined process in that situation is a great value. If the IRS already contacted you, though, you may have a problem. Now, one bad fact doesn't necessarily throw off the whole thing, but if the IRS has been sending you letters saying, hey, you need to file, it's going to be a little bit harder to explain why it wasn't your fault that you didn't file. What you do with this is you file 3 late tax returns. So as I said, I'm recording this in the beginning of April. So as of today, you would file tax returns, the beginning of April 2020. As of today, you would file 3 late tax returns. So 2016, 2017, and 2018 would all go together with Form 14653, statement of a certification by a U.S. person residing outside the U.S. That's the streamlined certification that includes the little biography and excuse note I mentioned. That all goes paper filed. You print it, you have to sign with an original signature. That all goes together there to the IRS, and your FBARs all get electronically filed. 6 FBARs, 6 late FBARs. You're filing FBARs 2013 through 18, which were late, or any of those years that were required, only the years that you required, and 2016 through 18 tax returns, and then 2019 as of today is still on time. So situation number 4, you have a similar situation, however, you were in the US for more than 30 days in each of the past 3 to 4 years. So in that case, you can't use the streamlined offshore program, and you have a couple other options. So let's say you actually did file tax returns, you just didn't include all your foreign income, or you were missing some major thing. So in that case, you may be eligible to use the streamlined domestic offshore procedures. It's in that case, you're using a different certification. It's Form 14654. And there are some penalties with this, and you do have to have filed original tax returns. Let's say you didn't file original tax returns, then you need to look at some other options. Now, it's a pretty unusual situation where you have someone who didn't file and they were in the States for more than a month each year, but that's a really, really good reason to speak with a professional and hash out exactly where your risks are and what the best procedure is for you. But one option may be what's called the voluntary disclosure practice. And in this, you're usually filing back 6 late tax returns. So 6 late tax returns, 6 late FBARs, and you can have penalties there. It's a longer process. It does go through the criminal investigation unit. They're going to review, even with Streamline, the criminal investigation unit does review every single statement, as far as I understand, according to the IRS. But this one, you actually need to have pre-clearance. So you're usually using an attorney if you're doing the voluntary disclosure practice. With the Streamline practice, the streamlined procedures, you may or may not be using an attorney. If you talk to a lot of attorneys, they're going to tell you, you've done something illegal, you must use an attorney, you need an attorney. And in many cases, it's really, really advisable to use an attorney. but legally it's not required. Legally, you can do streamline without. Voluntary disclosure practice, you really do need a representative with the IRS because there's a lot more to it. Situation number 5, you didn't file all the things you needed to file. Let's say that you knew for a while you were supposed to do tax returns, FBARs, other informational reports, but you knew you were supposed to file them. Maybe you ignored notices from your bank. Maybe your bank was sending you notices saying, hey, we're reporting all your information to the IRS and you're supposed to be filing FBARs. Or you didn't tell your accountant about certain things. Maybe you didn't tell your accountant you had foreign accounts. That's really common if you were using an accountant in the US. Maybe they sent you a questionnaire that had 100 questions and you just skimmed through them and you didn't bother to tell them about your foreign accounts, or they didn't ask. So that's one reason that you could not be eligible for the streamlined process. Maybe you were scared that you would owe taxes. Or another reason you wouldn't be eligible for the streamline process is that if you're in a certain profession where you really should have known, or if you have an immediate family who's an accountant or a tax attorney, that may make the streamline process, some of the other more gentler processes, more difficult to be eligible for. So as I was mentioning in the beginning, when I actually got a phone call and got cut off, it's a bit of an art more than black and white. These are not black and white, if this, then this. We have to look at all the facts. One bad fact does not keep you from being eligible for certain things. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But these are just some examples of reasons why you may have trouble being part of the streamlined process. So in cases like these, you may want to do the voluntary disclosure practice. But really, it's an art. If you have any facts which you think are very bad or could be criminal, you really need to consult with an attorney. When you speak with an accountant, generally, accountant isn't going to report you to the IRS, but technically, if an accountant were to get subpoenaed, they don't have attorney-client privilege. So if you have something in your case that makes you nervous, then that's a really good reason to include an attorney in the process. And the attorney can actually engage the accountant and pass that power of that attorney-client privilege onto the accountant. So through some of these if you're not using the streamlined process, if you go through the voluntary disclosure practice, then it's also called IRS Criminal Investigation Voluntary Disclosure Practice. That's the full name. So any of these things where you're not really sure if you're eligible for streamline, that's sort of the less streamlined version of coming forward. You're still coming forward. You're still going to get out of a lot of penalties. You're going to get amnesty from any criminal penalties for trying to hide something. But right now, there's not a lot in between. So if you don't meet the non-residency requirements, right now, there's no other, hey, I'm all innocent option besides the criminal investigation voluntary disclosure practice. Situation number 6 is that you're more than 4 years behind on your tax return. You don't owe any taxes. You're not more than 4 years behind. Okay, situation number 6 is that you're not more than 4 years behind on your taxes and you didn't owe any tax. You don't owe tax. You could file as late as you want. When it comes to tax returns, the penalties are a percentage of what you owe. So if you file late and you don't owe taxes, technically there is no penalty. It's not good. I'm not going to advise it. You don't want to be late, but the IRS isn't going to send you a bill. So in many cases like these, where you just missed a bunch of years, what do? You file them. You file the missing years. Let's say you moved to Israel, you knew you needed to file, and you filed through 2014, and then you just got busy. So what do? You file 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19. You just file the tax returns. And when I say just file, really I recommend speaking with a professional. Make sure they're filed right. But you don't necessarily need a streamlined process. Same with FBARs. you can file any late tax returns, and then separately you can do the delinquent FBAR submission procedures for any FBARs that are missing. The government, the U.S. government, does not automatically send penalties for late FBARs. They have the right to, but generally, if you come forward and you include a nice excuse on your FBAR, they're not sending you penalties. So you just need to file them before you get caught. One of the main things people ask me is about deadlines. So what are deadlines? Okay, so remember, first of all, we're talking about taxes that are already late. You have a tax return that's already late, you must still file it. You can't just say, hey, it's late, so better luck next year. No, there's no statute of limitations. If you don't file it, you must eventually, it's going to catch up with you. You have to file. So we're dealing with something that already is past the due date. So what are your deadlines? Your deadlines are, number one, before you get a letter. Once the IRS is investigating you, you can't use the amnesty, you can't use the streamline process. So that's number one deadline. Before you're under investigation or examination, before the program closes. So the streamline process has only been around in its current form since 2014, and we do have reason to believe it might close. So you got to get in there before it closes. You also have right now the coronavirus relief rebate checks. So if you want to get one of those during this calendar year, you need to file pretty soon so that the IRS sees that you exist and sends you that check. You're going to miss that out at some point. And then you also need to make sure that you're just not waiting too long to be non-willful if you're trying to use one of the processes that requires you proving you're non-willful. You need to be non-willful. If you were non-willful for the last 10 years and you find out today you did need to file, but then you wait 3 years, so you're not real, are you really non-willful for the past 3 years? And that is a really gray area. There's no black and white there, but I will tell you, I've talked to people about the process, and then they come back to me after 3 years and I say, I'm not the right accountant for you. I know too much. I can't do this. I can't sign something saying you didn't know you need to file because I know I told you 3 years ago you needed to file. So you do have some sort of a time sensitiveness there. Another question is about timeline. How long does this take? Wow, mostly that's going to depend on you. Obviously, it's going to depend on your accountant also. It's going to depend on how busy they are, what holidays you're hitting, if they're actually working, if they're in the office. But most of it is going to be how long it takes you to get your information together. And that can take anywhere. I've done them in a week, and I've done them and some of them drag out for a couple of years, and we just, end up not filing certain years that we started preparing because we just didn't get in on time. So really it's up to you. It depends on how motivated you are to finish. I love working with a motivated client. I'm actually really happy to work with someone who says, I need this information for my bag next week. If they're willing to get all the information, that's great. I'd much rather rush a job than have to remind myself every month what somebody's missing and have to call them and see if they still are on the ball. And costs. So as I mentioned in the beginning, if you need to file 3 tax returns, you should expect that that's going to cost approximately the same as if you had filed each year. So about 3 times as much as filing each year. Different accounts are different. Some accountants charge more for the streamline process. They might charge an extra 1,000 shekels to do the streamline procedures. It is more work. Especially if they're helping you write your streamline statement. If you're not using an attorney, you probably want an accountant who's going to help you craft a really nice streamlined statement, a really nice excuse letter. Some accountants give a discount if you're doing a bunch of years at once. It really depends on your situation, but it can be, I can't tell you off the top of my head in dollars because I'm usually dealing in shekels, but you can expect probably in most cases 6,000 to 10,000 shekels plus VAT for the streamlined procedures. That's kind of a rough average for most cases. If you have a foreign company, then you can expect it to be more. If you don't need FBARs or if you need very few FBARs, you can expect it to be less. And another thing is really important to consider is what can you practically complete? sometimes people come to me and they say, well, I didn't file the last 10 years and I want to be really, really careful and I want to file all 10 tax returns. And then if I give them a price quote for 10 tax returns, they're going to say, wait, what are you talking about? That's crazy. I can't do that. And then they think they shouldn't file anything. Or they want to do so much, but they're never going to finish it because let's say they want to do the five, they missed 5 tax returns, so they want to file 5 tax returns, but they can't get the income information from 5 years ago. So you need to find the right balance of legally, what are you required to do? What are the statute of limitations on what you've missed or what you've done wrong? And what information can you practically get? So some people tell me, oh, well, I just can't get my bank information. Well, that's not true. In most cases, you can call your bank. So you shouldn't be filing FBARs that say you don't know how much money is in your account if you don't know because you didn't ask the bank or you didn't look on the bank website. So some of these things, it takes work. It all does take work. Sometimes there are things that are close to impossible to get the information. In most cases, it's doable. In most cases, maybe you have to go to the taxing authorities and ask for transcripts, or you have to go to the bank a few times to remind them that you asked for these things. It's doable. All these processes can be a bit of work if you didn't know that you need to keep this information. So think for yourself and be honest with yourself about what you can practically do, and don't give a deposit to an accountant if you don't think you're ever going to really be able to get them all the documents. So find out ahead of time how they work and what documents you practically need getting them. And don't think that you're done just because you gave an accountant a deposit, because the accountant can't run around for you and actually gather the information. In most cases, they can't find all your income statements. They're not psychic. So if you weren't keeping track of your business expenses, they can't do that for you. So be prepared to do some legwork in all of these cases. So again, I want to say the most common thing that I'm dealing with is the streamlined foreign offshore procedures, and I'm going to link to a couple things in the notes. One is a video that I did about the basics of reporting, and another one is a blog post that talks specifically about the streamlined procedures. Again, this is for people who are non-willful. Usually, it's for people who haven't filed in at least 4 years in most cases, and you're filing 3 late tax returns and 6 late FBARs. So if you came to me today in the beginning of April, right now it's April 2020. If you came to me today, we would be filing 2016, 17, 18 as part of Streamline, tax returns 2016, 17, 18, FBARs 2013 through 18, all part of the Streamline package. And then I would go ahead and I would be preparing your 2019 taxes as well, because most people are starting to get their information already, and I find it more efficient to do all 4 tax returns at once. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, let me know in the notes here. I'm happy to answer them.